My name's Anthony. I'm 22. A few months ago, I lost the apartment I was renting when the landlord sold the place out of nowhere. No warning, just a 30-day notice and a handshake. I scrambled to find somewhere else, but between full-time classes and my part-time job, I couldn't swing anything decent on my own. That's when my friend Caleb offered a solution. "We've got a spare room," he said, like it was no big deal. "Stay as long as you need." Caleb and I have known each other since high school, both introverts, both decent at math, both kind of drifting through early adulthood in the same quiet way. His house was only 15 minutes from campus. A warm, well-kept place tucked between some older oaks, with a wraparound porch and a garage full of half-broken bikes. His mom, Julia, lived there too. I remembered her vaguely from back in the day, strict but warm, the kind of parent who made sure everyone had a snack before they went off to the skate park. I didn't think much of it at first. I needed a roof. She offered one. It felt practical. Temporary. But this isn't a story about practicality. Julia was in her 40s, maybe mid to late. Hard to tell, honestly. She had this confidence that made her feel younger than she probably was, but also, more settled. The kind of woman who didn't fidget or second-guess herself. Dark hair always tied back in a clip, sharp cheekbones, always barefoot around the house like it was her natural state. There was nothing obvious about her beauty. It just showed up in moments. When she was slicing vegetables. When she laughed at the news. When she looked up from her book and squinted at you like you'd said something too clever. At first, it was all normal. She kept her distance. I kept mine. Polite morning greetings, short kitchen chats about the weather or what Caleb was up to that day. I stayed out of her way, grateful but reserved. I didn't want to make it weird. I didn't want to be the guy crashing in your guest room. But slowly, quietly, things started to shift. It began with little things. She'd linger a bit longer in conversation. Ask more personal questions, what I was studying, if I missed my parents, what I cooked when I was alone. She'd brush past me in the hallway and her hand would rest on my arm for just a second too long. One night, she laughed at something dumb I said about my professor's sweater and touched my shoulder as she walked away, fingers curling lightly before letting go. I told myself I was imagining it. That she was just being friendly. But I also started to notice the way she looked at me when I wasn't looking. Or how she'd stand a little closer than she needed to when we were both in the kitchen. And then there was the night I came home late from a study group, and she was the only one still awake, sitting in the dark living room with a glass of wine, the glow of the TV flickering across her legs. She looked at me, smiled slow, and said, "You always come home this quietly?" That's when it clicked. Or maybe that's when I let it click. I didn't act on it. I didn't even think about acting on it. Not seriously. But I started noticing her in ways I hadn't before. Her laugh. Her posture. The way she curled her legs under her on the couch. The way she smelled like some kind of herbal shampoo and mint tea. It didn't feel like lust. It felt like curiosity, and then tension, and then something else I didn't have a name for. I wasn't proud of it. This was Caleb's mom. This wasn't a fantasy. This was a real woman, and I was living in her house, drinking her coffee, thanking her for laundry I didn't ask her to fold. But the longer I stayed, the harder it became to draw that line in my mind. And then one night, she knocked on my door. She knocked soft. 3 taps, then the creak of the door. I was lying on the bed, scrolling through my phone, pretending not to hear my thoughts. The house was quiet. Caleb was out, staying with his girlfriend for the night. I thought I was alone. But she stepped in with a cup in her hand. "Couldn't sleep," she said, holding it out. "I made tea. Figured you might want some." She wore a loose t-shirt, nothing fancy, but the kind that slips off one shoulder if you move too much. Her hair was down for once, brushed but unstyled, like she hadn't thought about it. She didn't have any makeup on. And somehow, that made her even harder to look at. I sat up, took the cup. Our fingers brushed. Neither of us moved away. That moment lasted longer than it should have. Longer than it needed to. She sat at the edge of the bed, uninvited but natural, and looked around my small space. "You've made it yours," she said softly. "It doesn't feel temporary anymore." I didn't know what to say. The room felt too still, like the air had thickened with all the things neither of us had said out loud. "I've been meaning to ask," she continued, "do you always stay this quiet? Or is it just with me?" I smiled faintly. "I'm just not great at being the first one to speak." She nodded, still looking straight at me. "I used to think that was a weakness. Silence. Turns out it's rare. It means you're paying attention." Her eyes flicked down, then back to mine. "You notice things, don't you?" It didn't feel like a question. More like an accusation. Or an invitation. I set the cup down. My hand was still warm from hers. "I notice you," I said before I realized I'd said it. She didn't blink. Didn't flinch. Her expression didn't change. But her hand moved, barely, and landed on mine. Light. Intentional. That's when the quiet shifted. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Her fingers slid between mine, slow. She didn't pull away. And then I kissed her. Not out of impulse. Not out of some sudden rush of emotion. It was careful. Deliberate. Like both of us had been moving toward it for weeks and finally stepped across the invisible line. She kissed me back. Soft. Focused. Her hand found the side of my neck, her breath slowed, then deepened. She leaned into it like she needed the weight of it, like she was starving and hadn't realized until that moment. When we finally pulled back, neither of us spoke. She sat there, our knees still touching, our hands still linked. Her eyes searched mine, not with panic, not with regret, but with something like fear. Not of me. Of what came next. "I shouldn't have," I started. She shook her head. "Don't. Please." And just like that, she stood up, brushed the front of her shirt like it mattered, and walked out of the room. Quietly. Like it never happened. Except it had. And now, there was no undoing it. The next morning, we didn't see each other. She was gone before I woke up. Caleb came back with leftover takeout and stories about his night. I nodded along, laughed in the right places, but my mind wasn't in it. I kept thinking about her hand on mine. Her mouth. The look in her eyes. For a few days, nothing happened. Nothing obvious. But everything had changed. The next time I saw her, we were all having dinner, Julia, Caleb, and me. She didn't look at me differently. Didn't touch me. Didn't say anything out of place. But the silence between us had a new shape. She sat across the table, and when Caleb left to grab his phone from upstairs, her gaze locked on mine for 2 seconds longer than it should have. And I knew, we both knew, that this wasn't over. We just didn't know what it had become yet. After that dinner, I started reading into everything. The way her hand brushed against mine when we both reached for the salt. The half-second longer it took her to say goodnight. The faint scent of her shampoo on the hallway stairs. I told myself I was imagining things, that one kiss didn't change the entire shape of our world. But it had. And once it happened, it became something that lived in every room we shared. I tried avoiding her. I stayed out later than usual, took longer walks, even spent a night at a buddy's place just to give myself space. But that only made it worse. Because space made the memories louder. And then one night, I came home to find her alone again. Caleb had gone to a concert. Julia was in the living room with a candle flickering on the coffee table, reading some mystery novel she probably wouldn't finish. She looked up, and I froze for a second like I'd walked into something too personal. "You're late," she said, not accusing. Just quiet. "Lost track of time," I muttered, kicking off my shoes. She nodded, closed the book. I made tea. I hesitated, then followed her into the kitchen. She poured a cup and slid it toward me like it was normal. And for a moment, it almost was. But then, as I turned to leave, she said, "Wait." I stopped. She walked around the counter and stood in front of me. Close. Too close again. But not touching. Her eyes searched mine like she was looking for the version of herself she left behind that night in my room. "I'm not proud of what happened," she said. "But I'm not sorry either." Neither was I. But saying that out loud felt like tipping something over that had been barely balanced. "I think about it," I admitted. "More than I should." Her expression softened. "I do too." That night, we didn't kiss. We didn't touch. We just stood in the kitchen, holding the weight of the thing between us, breathing quietly. The next time it happened, it wasn't in silence. She knocked again. This time with intention. I opened the door, and before I could say anything, she stepped in. No tea. No excuse. Just her. "I don't want to play games," she said. "I don't either." And then we kissed again. But this time, it didn't stop at one kiss. This time, she leaned her forehead against mine and whispered, "Just tonight. No questions." I nodded. We didn't speak after that. The hours blurred into one long stretch of flickering shadows and hushed movement. And afterward, when we lay there not touching, she turned toward me and said, "We can't keep doing this." "I know. We will, though." I didn't answer. Because I knew it too. What followed was a stretch of weeks I can only describe as unreal. We found patterns in the chaos. Caleb worked late on Mondays and Thursdays. Julia started grocery shopping on Wednesdays after I'd already left for class, just to avoid crossing wires. But when the house emptied out, we'd find each other. She never made it look like seduction. No red lipstick, no lingerie, nothing that felt put on. It was subtler than that. The smell of baking bread. Her fingers brushing my wrist as she passed me the butter. Her sitting a little closer on the couch while we pretended to watch the same rerun for the third time. I knew how dangerous it was. Every time Caleb made a joke about how "Mom likes you better than me," I felt it like a gut punch. Every time Julia and I made eye contact across the dinner table, something inside me tensed. Not from shame, but from how badly I wanted to reach for her and couldn't. And she felt it too. "I'm scared of what this could ruin," she said one evening while tying her hair up in the hallway. "But when I'm around you, I feel. I don't know. Awake." I wanted to tell her I felt the same. That she'd become the first thing I thought of in the morning and the last thing at night. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because naming it would only make it harder to end. Instead, I nodded. "Me too." And then she pulled me into her room again. We kept living like that, between doors that didn't lock and words we didn't say. And even though every time she said, "This has to be the last time," we both knew it wasn't. Not yet. There was this one night, maybe 2 months in, where I came home later than usual. Rain had soaked my hoodie, and my shoes were squishing on the carpet. I went straight to the bathroom to dry off, didn't even check if anyone was home. But when I opened the door, she was standing in the hallway. Julia. Barefoot, arms crossed, hair wet like she'd just showered. Her face didn't have that polished calm she usually wore, it was something else. Tired, maybe. Or just raw. You okay? I asked. She nodded, but not convincingly. Long day. I didn't push. I stepped past her to head to my room. Then she said, "Stay a minute." So I followed her down the stairs to the kitchen. She poured wine without asking. We sat at the island, her elbow propped on the counter, her fingers tracing lazy circles on the glass. She didn't look at me when she said, "Do you think I'm a bad person?" The question hit harder than I expected. I didn't answer right away. "No," I said eventually. "I think you're a person." She gave a short, quiet laugh. Not amused. Just tired. "I used to have rules," she said. "Lines I didn't cross. I don't know what happened. I did." I was sitting across from her. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to reach for her hand. I wanted to fix whatever weight was pressing down on her, but I knew I couldn't. Instead, I said, "We can stop." She looked up then. Really looked at me. "Can we?" she asked, almost too softly to hear. That night, we didn't go upstairs. We didn't even kiss. We sat there in the kitchen until the wine ran out and the dishwasher clicked off and the silence wrapped around us like a thread we couldn't untangle. And then, without a word, she stood and left. I didn't follow. But 2 nights later, it happened again. And again. We became better at hiding it, which somehow made it worse. Caleb never suspected a thing. He was busy with finals, dating someone new, constantly distracted. Julia and I would pass each other in the hallway during the day like nothing was wrong. A simple nod. A half smile. But under all of that was something thick and constant, like music playing from a room you couldn't quite find. There were moments that felt like they'd freeze in time. Like when she brushed her thumb across my cheek after we kissed, and whispered, "You remind me what it feels like to be wanted." Or the morning we both stood at the sink, her hand on my back, Caleb just upstairs getting ready for work. And the more real it felt, the more it started to unravel. Because I wanted more. And I knew I couldn't ask for it. Every time I saw her walking around the house in those quiet, domestic rhythms, folding towels, stirring soup, flipping through mail, I felt this ache. Like I was seeing the outline of a life I'd never be allowed to have. And then one evening, it cracked. She was distant. Not cold, just somewhere else in her head. We sat on the couch, but she didn't reach for me. Didn't lean in. She just stared at the muted television, chewing her thumbnail. I asked, "Is this the last time?" She didn't answer. Just stood up and said, "I need to go to bed." I didn't sleep that night. Neither did she, I don't think. The next morning, she left early for work. No note. No eye contact. That whole week, she avoided me. I knew what was coming. I could feel it in the walls. When she finally sat me down, at the kitchen table, of all places, she didn't try to soften the blow. She just said, "I can't do this anymore." Her voice trembled, but her face stayed calm. "I'm sorry," she said. I have too much to lose." I didn't argue. I didn't ask her to reconsider. I just nodded, heart pounding, and said, "Okay." And that was it. After that, the house turned into something else. Not cold, exactly, but quiet in a way that didn't feel neutral. Julia moved differently, more deliberate, less present. She'd still say good morning if we crossed paths, still asked if I wanted tea once. But there was space between every word now, like she was talking through glass. Caleb didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't say anything. He was busy with graduation stuff, lining up interviews, planning a road trip with friends. I sat on the edge of it all, packing my things in silence. Julia never came to say goodbye. I left a thank you note on the kitchen table, next to a small plant she once said she liked. Just a scribbled, vague kind of message, "Thanks for everything." Really? I wanted to say more, to put something honest down on paper, but anything real felt like a betrayal. I moved 2 hours away to a new city, took a low-level job in an office that smelled like printer toner and forgotten coffee mugs. Found a small studio apartment above a laundromat. It was cheap, and loud, and mine. But at night, when everything slowed down, my thoughts always returned to her. To the sound of her footsteps down the hall. To the way she used to laugh when something on TV caught her off guard. To the soft click of her bedroom door when it closed just before dawn. And always to the way she looked at me that last night, like she already knew the shape of the goodbye we weren't brave enough to speak. I didn't date anyone for a while. I couldn't. Everything felt dull by comparison. Nobody had her quiet steadiness. Nobody listened like she did. And maybe that's the thing I missed most, not the kisses, not the late-night touches, but the way she looked at me when I talked, like nothing else in the world mattered. I wondered sometimes if she missed it too. If she ever sat alone in that kitchen, holding a cup of tea she didn't really want, thinking about the kid who used to live down the hall. I wondered if she hated herself for it. If she hated me. But mostly, I wondered if she remembered it as clearly as I did. Time passed. The days stopped feeling so heavy. I started going out again. Met new people. Laughed without guilt. I started to believe that maybe what we had was a kind of fever, intense, impossible, and ultimately meant to burn itself out. And then, nearly a year later, I saw her. It was a quiet afternoon. I was in a coffee shop I didn't usually go to, one of those quiet little places with scratched-up tables and indie music playing too low to recognize. I was waiting for my drink when I looked up, and there she was. Julia. Standing at the counter. A dark coat draped over her shoulders. Hair pulled back in a way I hadn't seen before. She looked different. More tired. Or maybe just more distant. But when our eyes met, it was like the room froze. She smiled, soft, uncertain. I stood. "Hey," I said. Her voice was quieter than I remembered. "Anthony." I wasn't expecting. "Yeah. Me either." There was this long pause, full of everything we didn't know how to say in public. "You look good," she said, eyes flicking away. "So do you." She glanced toward the window. "Do you have time?" I nodded. "I do." And just like that, we sat down at a small table by the glass. The sunlight hit her face at an angle that made me forget how long it had been. We talked about nothing, at first. Weather. Work. Moving. She said she wasn't living in that house anymore. I didn't ask where she was now. I didn't need to. Then she looked down at her coffee and said, "I still remember that evening." And something inside me tightened. Not pain. Not joy. Just, wait. "I do too," I said. We sat there for a while. Not quite smiling. Not quite sad. And when she touched my hand, just briefly, I didn't pull away. We didn't make plans. We didn't talk about the past. But when she asked if I had time to walk, I said yes. We left the coffee shop like two people who hadn't seen each other in years, but remembered exactly how the other moved. Her hands stayed in her coat pockets, but her shoulder brushed mine now and then. The street was quiet. Late autumn. Leaves crunching underfoot. She didn't speak much at first, just walked with that familiar calm, like she was trying to figure out if what was happening was real. Eventually, she said, "I think about it more than I admit." I didn't ask what she meant. I just nodded. We reached the park at the end of the block. It was mostly empty, just a few people walking dogs or sitting alone on benches with headphones in. She found a spot near a small, empty playground. Sat down slowly. I kept waiting for it to fade, she said. But some nights, I'd hear something, like a song, or a line from a movie, and it would all come back. Not just the feeling, but the stillness. That quiet between us. She paused, her eyes on the swing set. I think that's what I miss most, she added. The quiet. I sat beside her. It never really went away from me either. We didn't touch. Didn't need to. That park bench, that silence, it felt like we'd stepped back into whatever world we'd left behind a year ago. She turned to me. It wasn't just about wanting something I couldn't have. It was about feeling like I mattered. Like someone saw me. And that scared me more than anything. I understood that. I'd spent a year trying to become someone new, but part of me had stayed in that house, on that couch, in that kitchen, beside her. You were the first person, I said, who made me feel like I wasn't pretending to be okay. She looked at me, eyes soft. That's all I ever wanted to give you. We sat there until the sun dipped a little lower and the wind picked up. Neither of us said we should go. Neither of us wanted to break whatever fragile moment we'd stepped into. But time doesn't freeze, no matter how much you want it to. She stood first. Brushed her coat down. Looked at me for a long moment. I should go. I nodded. Yeah. But then she hesitated. Reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a slip of paper, folded tight. My new number, she said. If you ever want to talk. I took it, thumb brushing the crease. Thanks. She smiled, faint but real. Don't wait too long. And then she walked away. I didn't move. Just watched her go. The trees rustled, the air chilled. I sat there for another 10 minutes, holding the paper in my hand like it might disappear if I let go. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed with the lamp off, the paper unfolded on my knee. I didn't text. I didn't call. I just kept reading the number over and over again, as if that would bring her back. It was days before I messaged her. Just a simple line, "You free this weekend?" She replied almost immediately, "Yes." "Are you?" We didn't plan anything elaborate. Just coffee again. But this time, it felt different. Like the past was still with us, but it wasn't weighing us down, it was giving us permission. I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's a beginning, or just another chapter in something we'll never finish. All I know is that when I saw her smile again, really smile, it felt like something old had turned into something quietly, unexpectedly new. And that scared me in a way nothing else ever has. We started meeting once a week. No plans. No labels. Just coffee shops and quiet walks, places where nobody knew us and time moved a little slower. It was cautious at first, like we were both afraid to say the wrong thing, to ask too much, to admit how much we still carried from that year before. But the silence between us wasn't empty. It was full of all the things we didn't need to explain anymore. One afternoon, we ended up at this small bookstore tucked behind a bakery. She picked up a novel, one of those quiet, aching ones with long paragraphs about longing and time. She read the back, then handed it to me. "This one's about second chances," she said with a half smile. I didn't know if she meant us. I didn't ask. We never talked about the house. Never brought up Caleb. It was this silent rule between us, that whatever this was, it only existed in the now. I think we both knew the moment we dragged the past into it, the whole thing would collapse under the weight of its own history. And still, sometimes, the weight showed up. She'd go quiet after certain questions. She'd shift when I mentioned home. And there were days she'd cancel last minute, texting, "Sorry. Just a rough one today." I never pushed. I'd just write back, "It's okay. Take your time." But the truth is, I didn't always feel okay. Some nights, I'd lie awake wondering what we were really doing. Whether this was a slow drift back into something that had already proven it couldn't last, or if we were building something new on the ashes of something fragile. Then one evening, she invited me to her place. It wasn't the old house. This was an apartment across town. Smaller, neater. No family photos. Just quiet, lived-in space. She made dinner, simple pasta and a bottle of red wine. We sat at a small table near the window. No candles. No pretense. Just her in a worn sweatshirt and wool socks, barefoot again like nothing had changed. After we ate, she said, "Sometimes I think about calling him Caleb." She nodded. Just to hear how he's doing. But I don't. I think I'm afraid of what I might feel if I hear his voice. I didn't know what to say. So I reached across the table and touched her hand. Just once. Brief, careful. She looked up at me with that same mix of sadness and peace I remembered from the last time I saw her in that kitchen. The night she let me go. "I'm not asking for anything," she said softly. "Not a future. Not a promise. I don't want this to be nothing." "It wasn't," I said. "It isn't," she whispered. "We didn't sleep together that night. We didn't even kiss. We just sat on the couch after dinner, my hand resting near hers, both of us listening to the hum of the heater and the wind brushing the windows. Before I left, I stood in the doorway for a long second. She didn't move. But her eyes followed me. "If you ever need to walk away," she said, "I'll understand." I nodded. "And if you ever need me to stay, I'll try." She smiled, tired but warm. "That's more than I expected." I walked out into the cold, pulled my jacket tighter, and didn't look back. I don't know where this ends. Maybe it already ended once, and this is just the part after, the part where two people realize that some connections don't disappear. They just get quieter, until the world finally lets them speak again. All I know is, when she said, I still remember that evening, something in me unlocked. Like I'd been holding my breath for a year without knowing it. And maybe, just maybe, we're still learning how to exhale.